Hey ocean travelers around the world, this is the Mary Celeste, a ship found perfectly fine, but empty. A routine Atlantic crossing turned into the cleanest maritime riddle on record. An intact brigantine, cargo aboard, crew vanished, and evidence that refuses to agree. The scene opens late morning in the Atlantic near the Azores, a patch of blue broken by two small sails on the horizon. One belongs to a British brigantine, the De Gratia, on a sensible westbound track. The other looks wrong from the first glance, sails drawing but slovenly set. A kind of ragged order that speaks of haste or neglect. The distance closes and no signal rises. No figure moves on deck. Through a spyglass the rig stands normal enough. Fore and aft canvas hangs. A headsail strains a bit. Yet the ship keeps her own shallow line without a hand on the helm. That should not happen. Boats launch when the water allows. The boarding party rows across a lazy swell, hooks on and climbs. They call out. The call dies in rigging. In 5 minutes of calm observation the first list forms. The ship is sound. The cargo hatch shows signs of airing. Some sails are cut or worn. The binnacle is standing but the compass may be off. The boat is gone from its davits. The galley gear is there. The stores are there. The crew is not. The first sweep aboard says more by what it does not show. No splintered door, no blood, no signs of a fight, no smashed crates, no looting spree. The captain's cabin shows order, not chaos, clothes, sewing kit, everyday objects where people left them when they expected to use them again. The hold carries denatured alcohol in casks, heavy and inert in silence. Yet the smell of spirits lingers faintly in the air near the hatch. The logbook is present, but ends days before this sighting. A pump lies rigged. Some deck planking is wet, though not flooded. A few loose lines scud and slap with the swell. The chronometer that keeps precise time may be missing. The sextant and some small instruments may be missing. The ship's yawl, the lifeboat, is definitely missing. Food stores look fine. Water casks for daily use are accessible. In other words, the ship looks like a place a crew could have continued to live and work, unless they knew something a casual visitor did not. Let's keep the promise clear from the start. This story will use logs, law, weather, ship design, and cargo chemistry to separate what is known from what is only dramatic. The method stays simple. Name each fact, add where it came from, test it against seamanship rather than superstition, and keep a running ledger of what supports abandonment, what argues against it, and what remains unknown. No theories without receipts. The timeline is the spine. The Mary Celeste clears New York in late autumn, bound for Genoa, Italy, carrying a cargo of denatured alcohol packed in wooden casks. She is a sturdy American brigantine under the command of Captain Benjamin Briggs, an experienced mariner traveling with his wife and their young daughter. The crew is small but competent, a typical complement for a ship this size. The voyage proceeds normally across the western North Atlantic and into mid-ocean. A last routine position goes into the log, a noon sight, a latitude and longitude that place her roughly a week's sail west of the Azores. After that, silent. Days later the De Gratia sights her under partial sail, unattended roughly east-northeast of the last logged position, and drifting on a plausible line for a vessel left to wind and current. Expected track and observed drift can be made to agree if one assumes nobody was aboard to tend her for several days. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy and want to fall asleep with ocean stories whenever you want. Take a moment and then return here to the same hour on the same day. The boarding party stands in the waist and takes stock of the practical. The first questions any sailor asks line up automatically. Is the hull sound? Yes. Is the rig capable of getting her to port? Yes, with work. Are the bilges filling? Not dramatically. Why then is no one aboard? The answer can only come from small clues, so the list gets more careful. A hatch has been opened and left loose, as if someone wanted to clear fumes. The pumps show signs of use, and possibly trouble. Some charts in the sextant are gone. items a captain would naturally take if leaving even for a short time. The lifeboat and its painter are not on their hooks. The stove is secured. There is no wreckage of a second vessel and no spray of broken timbers anywhere around the ship. Whatever happened did not happen with splinters and shouts. It happened with choices. The people behind those choices were ordinary and competent. Captain Benjamin Briggs had sailed merchantmen across these waters many times. His letters before the voyage show a mind focused on prudence, religious in habit, and proud of a well-found ship. His wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia were along in a cabin set for family, which says something about the captain's expectations for the weather and for the vessel. The first mate and crew were experienced hands from a mix of backgrounds. Nothing in their records paints a picture of a ready mutiny or a crew likely to sabotage their own safety. That matters because when a captain with that profile makes a cautious call, later generations should consider caution first. The ship herself deserves a few plain details. The Mary Celeste is a brigantine. 2 masts, square sails on the foremast and fore and aft sails on the main. She is not a big ship by modern standards, but she's not a toy either. Her tonnage and build make her a typical workhorse of her era, able to carry a modest cargo across ocean distance without asking heroics from the crew. In her hold sit casks of denatured alcohol, industrial spirits meant for use in factories and processes ashore. The cargo is legal, valuable, and touchy. Alcohol sealed in wood expands and contracts as temperatures change, and vapors build in headspace if casks leak or are imperfectly tight. A smell of spirits in a closed hold is not unusual, but at sea, in the mind of a careful skipper, the line between normal and not normal narrows when flammable vapor and enclosed space meet. Weather helps build the context. The Azores in late autumn live under shifting patterns, passing depressions, squalls, brisk winds that ease into mild spells, and long-period swell that can speak of distant storms even when local breezes feel tame. A barometer on a captain's desk moves in gentle arcs that hide hard facts. A falling glass means trouble not here yet. A steady line can conceal a hidden shift in sea state. A ship can feel perfectly fine to an outsider and yet be working through a combination rain and squalls. Confused swell, the odd breaking crest that keeps a crew's attention tight. This patch of ocean can look calm on a wide shot and still be risky in 2 small ways: slippery decks and the sudden gust, both of which you marry to a hold that smells like spirits and you get unease. So how does perfectly fine coexist with anomalies? A list without mood helps. The yawl gone. That is a serious fact, because no prudent captain lowers a boat lightly. The log stops days before the sighting. That is odd, but not unheard of. If weather or work steals time, some hatches open. That points toward airing the hold. Dampness on deck and signs the pump had been tended. That suggests water somewhere it was not wanted, whether in bilge or in the upper layers of cargo. Some sails cut or badly set. That suggests a crew left quickly, or a prolonged period without attention. Instruments missing. That suggests a planned departure, not a panicked one. In other words, the deck reads like this: genuine concerns that could justify leaving temporarily, wrapped inside a hull that could have carried them safely had they stayed. To keep all this straight, the evidence table gets 3 buckets: supports abandonment, missing yawl and navigational instruments, opened hatches, faint spirit smell, pump use, damp deck, cargo type, argues against abandonment, intact hull, food and water in good order, no fire marks, no severe weather recorded right then, sails set enough to hold course, unknown, exact bilge depth, at the moment of decision, exact readings from the compass and chronometer, the crew's most recent experience with fumes or heat in the hold, and the condition of the yawl's painter line when last seen by its own crew. The rest of this journey drops facts into those buckets. Start with the wet math. On a ship like this, pumps handle nuisance water, rain through seams, spray driven below, condensation, small leaks. Pumping can be ordinary and regular, but if a sounding rod tells a captain that water stands in the bilge above a comfortable height, The calculation changes. Free surface effect. The way water sloshing in a partly filled space reduces stability becomes part of that calculation. The hole does not need to be a pond for the effect to matter. A few inches in the wrong place, freeing in a roll turns a steady ship into one that answers the helm more slowly and heels slightly more than expected. If a pump has trouble drawing because choked, or the rod reading is underestimated or overestimated, the captain can read risk wrongly for a few crucial hours. If the pump strainer is clogged, pumping sounds busy but achieves little. If hatches are open to vent fumes, more water may find its way down. None of this is dramatic. All of it is heavy in a mind that has family aboard. Now the cargo. Alcohol vapor risk does not require a blackened deck or wrecked timbers to be real. Headspace in casks increases with heat. Vapors heavier than air can pool low and find their way into compartments. If the hold is not ventilated, a whiff of spirits at a hatch is normal. A strong collective smell mixed with a recent rise in temperature could feel like a warning. A small whoomph, a flash fire that scorches air without leaving burn marks on wood, can happen if a spark meets a flammable concentration of vapor under certain conditions. If that happened and blew off a hatch cover, it might frighten a cautious captain into getting everyone topside and then away from the hull until the air could be cleared. Opening hatches to air the hold is a sensible step. Moving people into the yawl while towing astern on a painter line while the ship calms down is also sensible, especially if a calm spell makes reboarding look easy later. The line chafes. A gust hits. The yawl falls behind in a confused sea. A simple safety move becomes separation. Sails and rig tell their own small story. Which sails were set when the boarding party arrived matters. If heavy weather canvas was still up but trimmed poorly, it might say the crew had reduced sail before leaving, planning to keep the ship from running away while absent. If a headsail was torn, it could suggest recent squally conditions, or a hurried luff. Rigging that looks workable but untidy suggests an interruption rather than abandonment by despair. Nothing about the rig screams catastrophe at distance. Everything about it murmurs interruption from close up. Drift modeling connects the dots. The eye cannot. A crew in a yawl, tied astern by a painter, would sit lower in the water than the mothership, with more drag and less momentum. In even a modest wind and swell pattern, a yawl can yaw, swing side to side, until the painter chafes. If the line parts quietly at night or in a gust, the lifeboat can fall behind quickly, without a tall mast and sails to grab available wind. A small boat loses ground minute by minute. If the crew cuts the line intentionally because they fear the main hull will draw them into danger in a sudden wind shift, they then must decide whether to return later. A few miles of separation in this sea can become an hour, then 3, then a day, especially if the mothership keeps small way on under the sails left set. Now add the currents near the Azores and the day's wind. A slow separation that keeps both hulls floating but robs them of each other. The brigantine is found, the boat is not. Against this quiet physics, the Dea Gratia's story is the anchor. Her master, her mate, and the boarding crew gave statements under oath. From those statements, a string of simple facts emerges. They sighted the ship. They found no one aboard. They observed dampness and pump issues. They noted some sails in poor shape and some set. They recorded that food and water were present, and that the cabin showed normal domestic life, not a frantic evacuation. They brought the Mary Celeste under control and sailed her to Gibraltar for salvage proceedings. These notes matter because they are measured and close to the event, not dressed for a newspaper. The Gibraltar salvage hearing stepped into the role that maritime law assigns in such puzzles. A court must decide what to pay the salvors and whether anything improper occurred. The Dea Gratia's crew stood to gain a fair award if the court found that they acted in good faith. The judge looked closely at the possibility of fraud, conspiracy, or staged abandonment. Doubt hovered in the room, but proof did not. The award came in low, compared to the value involved. Small enough to signal suspicion without leveling a charge. That size speaks. It says the court did not love the feel of the case, but could not convict anyone's character. In salvage, low awards are a judge's side-eye in numeric form. Insurance offices and rumor mills then did what they always do when evidence is thin and public curiosity is thick. Fraud theories rose. Collusion between captains, cargo tampering, and insurance play gone wrong. Weigh these against documents and the habits of the people involved, and they wobble. A complicated fraud that requires 2 ships, 2 captains, and the staged disappearance of a family and crew, all for an uncertain salvage payout that ended up small, is the opposite of a tidy criminal plan. It is a story that feels good to tell and bad to live, without hard receipts, letters, money trails, credible witnesses who gain nothing by speaking. Fraud remains a ghost with no weight. Other hypotheses deserve clean, short tours. Piracy leaves marks, and here there were none. No plundered cabin, no valuables cherry-picked, no hull damage, no signs of boarding by force. Mutiny leaves mess and witnesses. Even a clean mutiny sends ripples through community memory, and none convincing appear around this crew. A sea quake can disturb water and hold spaces and dislodge cargo, but it leaves no direct trace. It is a mechanism in search of other evidence. A waterspout can spook sailors and move light gear, but leaving a ship entirely in serviceable condition because a waterspout passed by is unlikely as a sole cause. Each alternative finds a small shred to hold and then drops it when weighed against the deck as it was found. The explanation that keeps surviving the weighings is quiet. A rational abandonment triggered by a temporary scary combination. Fumes and faulty sounding, gust and free surface, caution sharpened by family aboard, and then separation that turned temporary into permanent. Comparative cases prove that prudent crews sometimes leave ships that look fine from afar. Captains in the age of sail occasionally stepped into boats when they believed a hull would founder because water made its way where it should not. Investigations later found the hull afloat and towable. The pattern that matches best is not the flamboyant vanishing act. It is the story where everyone does exactly what seamanship prescribes for the worst moment, and then the small boat never meets the greater hull again. To keep the rebuild honest, navigation details deserve a paragraph of their own. A chart on the table shows a set of noon sights tracked as small circles. Each day's dead reckoning pushed forward and corrected by the noon line. A pencil notes weather and course changes. If instruments went into the yawl, the captain intended for someone to continue taking sights. If only some instruments went and the chronometer remained, then timekeeping on the boat became harder and position work grew uglier fast. A careful navigator knows the limits of dead reckoning in confused wind and sea. He also knows that near the Azores land sits close enough to smell on some days, but currents can deny a direct approach. A moderate west-northwest wind, a contrary current, and a small boat heavy with people can miss an island by miles and never see it. Restitching the chronology day by day helps. The last log entry places the ship doing well on a normal course. The next likely events: opening hatches to vent after smelling spirits, measuring bilge water, trying the pump, fall into a 2-day window that ends with the crew leaving temporarily. Within that window, a squall line or a gust could tear a headsail, lace decks with spray, and turn a cautious mind toward the yawl for an hour. That hour then becomes a separation if the painter chafes or is cut. The ship continues under light canvas to the northeast by east and is seen days later. The lifeboat, lower in the water and poorer at grabbing wind, falls behind and drifts out of sightline. If the crew returns later, they find only sky. Without a radio, all search becomes geometry and luck. Hardware speaks is an old dockside truth, and the Mary Celeste's hardware whispers. A yawl painter chafed would present a certain look where it parted, a hatch cover propped, rather than nailed down, signals ventilation not panic, lashings left in place, and tarpaulins folded rather than ripped. Say, careful, not chaotic. A pump handle secured to its post with a turn of line. Says someone paused in the midst of labor to make sure it would be there later. These clues are tiny. Taken together they compose posture. The crew expected to come back aboard. Letters and character notes matter when the physical record grows thin. Captain Briggs's writing to family before sailing lines up with the portrait survivors painted. Conservative judgment, a taste for order, careful devotion to duty, and trust in Providence allied to practical caution. Nothing in those sentences hints at desperation, fraud, or a taste for risk. The choice to bring his wife and toddler aboard on a transatlantic run further suggests confidence in the ship and in the season. That peace belongs wherever someone tries to cast him as reckless. The man on this deck was not the man who gambles with matches in a powder room. Crew skills created options and limits. Who among them could launch a yawl in a lively swell? Likely several. Who could navigate in a small boat? The captain and mate for certain. Perhaps a seaman with enough practice at noon sights to be useful. Who could keep order in a cramped open boat with a toddler aboard? A whole crew that worked together on deck day after day could do it for hours or days. Boredom and cold would be the enemies, not discipline. Water and provisions placed in the boat would carry them far enough to try for the Azores if wind and current cooperated. If wind and current did not, that effort might become a slow circle around hope. Ship design and stability return to the center, because they always do in these stories. Free surface effect is not a textbook trick. It is a hand on the shoulder. Picture a large tray with a thin layer of water. Tilt the tray. The water rushes to the low side and keeps weight where you do not want it. When you try to stand the tray upright again. Now imagine a ship with a few inches of water spread across a span. In a normal roll, that water slides to the low side and stays a moment when the ship needs to rise, increasing the heel and adding a sloshy delay to righting. That delay feels like sluggishness to a helmsman and like heaviness to a captain watching the angle of the world widen a degree or two past comfort. He need not panic. He only needs to imagine one bad combination, gust plus slosh plus roll, and decide he prefers his family and crew sitting 5 feet lower in the yawl until he is sure the hold is no threat. Cargo specifics close the loop between chemistry and behavior. Wooden casks breathe. Oak swells when wet and shrinks when dry. Denatured alcohol in casks at sea will smell because wood is not a perfect barrier. Headspace increases when temperature rises. Vapor pressure increases with it. A handful of casks, leaking slightly, could perfume a hold enough to make every board smell suspicious. That scent, alongside a few open hatches and a pump that feels less effective than yesterday, can make a cautious man say everyone up. He does not need flames to make that call. He needs a whiff, a worry, and a plan to put his people in the boat on a line for a short while, until the air clears. Myths then step forward and ask to be corrected cleanly. The meal left on the table that has filled headlines for a century is a flourish from fiction, not a line from the boarding party's notes. Blood on the deck often turns out in retellings to be tar or wine or rust or simply the stain of a busy ship at sea. Mysterious final log note collapses under a straightforward reading of the book. A last noon sight noting position and routine, not a melodramatic entry. Each correction returns the listener to the quiet, stubborn puzzle where it belongs. No drama, just decisions. The media afterlife did the case no favors. A popular short story published later under a slightly misspelled name, Marie Celeste, bent the record into a ghost shape, complete with eerie embellishments. The name stuck to the public mind harder than the facts did. That happens when a puzzle is clean, human, and sad. The task now is to lift the weight of the story off the facts and set them in order again without meanness. Fiction can keep its chills. The real case keeps its respect. Weather backcasts supply the last practical frame for the week in question. Barometers along common tracks show passing lows and the kind of wind shifts that bother sailors more than readers. Squalls and then blue, veers and backs that mean more trimming than sleeping. Long swell lines from distant storms cross the local wind sea and make the deck feel untidy underfoot. In that crosshatch, a small boat on a painter line steals odd jerks and yaws that a person in the boat remembers and a person on the main deck does not see. Reconstructing those days suggests seas that could warrant a temporary step into the yawl even as a casual visitor later calls the ocean smooth. Lifeboat feasibility to the Azores is sober math. A boat with a handful of oars and a small sail can make 4 or 5 knots with a fair breeze and far less when wind and current disagree. From the likely separation point to the nearest land is a number of miles that a good crew could cover in a day. In perfect conditions or never cover at all. If a contrary current undermines every hour's work, provisioning could stretch for days. A sighting by a passing vessel would be salvation. No such record appears. In this ocean, missing landfall by a few miles can be the same as missing it by 50. It is not romance. It is geometry, hunger, and weather. Salvage Law's small primer helps explain why the Gibraltar Award felt stingy. Courts weigh value saved, risk to salvers, time and labor, and any whiff of impropriety. Where proof of impropriety is absent, but suspicion scratches at the door, the numbers answer without accusations. The De Gratia's crew received a payment that said thank you in a formal tone rather than bravo in a generous one. That tone simmered rumors for years. It did not prove anything beyond judicial mood. Ethics in telling the story. Draw a line in the water and ask everyone to respect it. Names, Briggs, Sarah, Sophia, the crew belonged to people who set out to do an ordinary hard job and did not return. The way to honor them is plain. Keep the facts straight. Talk about seamanship before spectacle, and resist turning their silence into a haunted house. The ocean takes without leaving explanations, as often as it gives back bodies or hulls. Saying we do not know is not weakness. It is loyalty to the truth. Modern recreations and controlled tests add small, useful bricks to the wall. Demonstrations of alcohol vapor puffs in confined spaces show that a sudden flash can blow open a hatch without charring wood. Tank tests of free surface effect demonstrate how inches of water across a broad area soften a ship's riding moment. Drift experiments with small boats on lines show how quickly chafe can do its slow work. None of these proves what happened on one day aboard one ship. Together they show that a quiet, rational chain is possible without paranormal insertions. For anyone who loves maritime puzzles, a compact field guide helps. Start with primary sources. Logs, sworn strömmon, official reports, weigh weather and hardware before gossip and headlines. Keep an evidence ledger with 3 columns. Supports, contradicts, unknown, and refuse to move facts between columns just because a narrative wants them to. When imagination speaks, let it then ask it to wait on deck while the instruments answer. A handful of quick answers calm the common questions. Was food found on the table as if a meal had been abandoned mid-bite? No. That is a durable myth, born of fiction. Could piracy leave no trace? In theory, yes. In practice, pirates seeking value leave evidence of selection, and none appears. Would an explosion from alcohol vapor scorch the deck? Not necessarily. A low-oxygen puff can produce force without charring. Could a waterspout physically lift a crew overboard? Waterspouts can be dangerous, but using one as a crane that plucks only humans and leaves a ship tidy is movie thinking, not seamanship. Small, vivid scenelets supply texture without overreach. A damp log page pegged under a skylight in weak sun to dry before anyone can write the next noon line. A pump handle tied off so it does not jump and bruise a shin in the next lurch. A yawl painter worn thin where it crosses a rough edge, 1 more hour of rubbing away from parting. A hatch propped to air the hold while a cautious man sniffs the opening and tests with his palm for warmth. A barometer note that looked harmless when written and terrible in hindsight after 3 squalls passed faster than anyone wanted to see. As the first stage of this long, careful narrative settles, one picture stands still enough to keep an intact hull, a sensitive cargo, ambiguous wetness, a cautious captain with family aboard, and a chain of small, reasonable steps that could end with everyone alive in a boat that never meets the ship again. No ghosts, no melodrama, just a sea that widens distance faster than human signals can close it, and a riddle that endures because reason sometimes loses to circumstance. They were not the first crew to step into a courtroom with a sound ship and a missing crew behind them, but their case would become the benchmark. In Gibraltar, the law tried to line up hardware, journals, and human intent into a single neat line. It never quite did. The senior legal officer listened as each member of the Die Gratia explained what he saw and in what order. He asked careful questions about wet planking, about the state of the rig, about whether the papers were in the right drawer, about why a man might unship a yawl in ordinary weather. The tone of those sessions mattered. It was not a ghost hunt. It was a search for profit motive or criminal plan. Power in maritime law runs through simple levers. Honest finders are rewarded for honest salvage. Bad actors are punished. Suspicious actors are paid less. In the end, the award came in small. It signaled mistrust without naming a crime. It also quietly closed the door on any theory that required the salvers to be villains. If the court had proof of foul play, that door would not have stayed only mostly shut. Step by step, the inquiry pressed into hardware and chemistry. Pumps on ships, like Mary Celeste, had personalities. Every crew knew how each one sounded when healthy and how quickly it bit into the water when primed. A pump that wheezed and barely produced a thin stream could lie to ears and hands for a few minutes before a more honest assessment arrived. If days of squalls washed more water down through open hatches, a captain might feel the ship's behavior change underfoot. That feeling is not theater. It's a tiny extra lean in a gust, an extra second of delay returning from a roll. Add a faint sting in the nose at a hatch, alcohol vapor mixing with salt tang, and an experienced mind reaches for low-risk moves. Open the covers to vent, post a man to watch, then put everyone in the boat on a line while the hold breathes. The plan could have been that simple. Circle behind the ship on a painter, keep the yawl snug astern, and watch the open hatch like a kettle. Human minds on long watches, at a few understandable edges. A captain with his child aboard does a different math. That is not sentimentality. It is a safety factor in human form. Every what-if weighs slightly more. What if a strike of static sets fumes off? What if a spark dropped from a stove lid meets a pocket of vapor? What if a sudden hard heel makes lanterns tumble against a beam? He knows the odds of a serious fire are still low. He also knows the cost would be catastrophic, so he moves people into the boat, planning to return aboard after a test. He is not abandoning the ship. He is adjusting the scene to buy time. The yawl is the hinge. A boat on a painter, behind a sailing ship in small seas, will dance. It will swing off to one side, surge back as the line tightens, and swing the other way. The friction point where the rope meets a hard edge, or a fair lid that isn't perfectly smooth. Choose fibers slowly, then quickly. Chafe takes its payment without warning. Is old boatyard wisdom. Because the last few fibers break very fast. If that break came in a brief squall or a night gust, the small boat would lose the slipstream and the mothership would slide ahead. The gap would widen. A crew in the yawl might light a lantern at the bow and shout. A gust would take both. The next time they faced the stern, there could be no stern to face. In a world without radios, a separation of a mile in a squall line is the same as a separation of a day. The lack of damage made newspapers hungry for something more dramatic. Wild rumors tried on different costumes. Insurance fraud made an easy costume to wear because it makes any neat outcome feel explainable in a single sentence. But it asked for too many moving parts. Two captains in quiet league, for what? An uncertain salvage that a judge could crush at will. A staged disappearance of a family to bolster a convoluted payout that ended up small. The numbers never lined up with human reality. Follow the money is good advice when money has a place to go. Here there was only the slow arithmetic of court-led salvage, not a pile of secret coins waiting in a cove. Mutiny is often invited to the stage when a case is famous. The facts kept it waiting outside. No signs of struggle. No looting of obvious valuables. No witnesses later bragging in portside rooms. Mutiny is loud in aftermath even when it is quiet in execution. This case stayed quiet before and after. Piracy fared no better. Pirates who take the trouble to steal a crew leave the place lighter. Far fewer useful objects remain. That's because pirates are practical. Here the practical things were still there. Food, water, tools, spare lines, even personal items that hold value to raiders. It made no sense. A waterspout, a seaquake, a rogue wave that took only people and not the ship. These arrive often in magazine retellings because they provide a sense of active nature without requiring thought. A waterspout can damage sails and wet decks, but it does not yet offer a path from spout seen to orderly yawl lowered. Instruments taken, no return. A seismic jolt underwater might stir ballast or surprise sleepers, but surprise is not a plan. The deck told a different story, not surprise but measured action. The simplest explanation that fits the measured action is the one that counts. Here is a clean restitching of days that does not claim more detail than it owns. The Mary Celeste moves eastward, her noon sights forming a tidy trail. The weather seesaws squalls in one band, sun behind them, shifting breeze. A smell in the hold grows from faint to sharp, for reasons that might be as mundane as day-to-day temperature steps. In casks and a few leaky staves, hatches are open to vent. A pump is put to work. The pump feels weak. Maybe its suction is fouled. Maybe the free surface slosh makes it seem like progress is slow. Maybe both. The captain, a cautious man with a family aboard, does not like combining open hatches, known vapor and a ship that answers the wheel a little slower than yesterday. He says, in effect, everyone in the boat for a bit, we tow astern, we watch the hatch, we give it time. The tow goes fine until it does not. Chafe eats the painter, or a gust makes someone reach for a knife so the yawl won't be driven under the counter. The separation becomes a fact. The big hull makes a little speed under reduced canvas. The small boat makes less. Night and line of sight take over from intention. The two paths never cross again. Quick fact. Dozens of ships over the centuries have been left by their crews for solid, rational reasons, and later found to be still afloat. The winners in those stories are the crews. They live sometimes picked up by passing vessels or making landfall in small boats. The losers are the narratives that want a monster in the wings. This case refuses to tell who lived. It only gives a clean deck and the shape of a choice. Charts on the captain's table allow a second read that keeps romance out and craft in. A line of pencil marks tracks latitude and longitude. Small annotations mark magnetic variation used, courses steered, and adjustments made for set and drift. Without the chronometer in the boat, time at sea becomes approximate, and positions drift in the head. With it, a navigator can work noon sights and morning and evening lines with modest confidence. Whether the chronometer remained aboard is contested in retellings. What matters to the scenario is that some instruments intent to navigate went with them. That again argues for temporary controlled absence instead of an end-of-rope panic. Hardware details continue to play their quiet parts. A hatch cover propped with a spar or a wedge is the ordinary way to vent a hold while keeping rain off. Tarps lashed loosely to let air through and keep squall water at bay makes sense. A pump handle tied off says someone meant to return to the task and did not want the handle flailing in the roll. Coil of line left neat, a half-finished minor repair set aside, a mug in a safe place to keep it from flying. These small bits of order stubbornly suggest nobody left in terror, people left in hope. Let's go step by step also means returning to character without inventing interior monologues. Letters that survived from before the voyage show a captain who weighed risk through the lenses of faith and prudence. Colleagues described him as steady, almost formal. None painted him as reckless mercenary or given to theatrical acts. Cautious to a fault would not be too strong. Place that person against open hatches and a smell he does not control. Add a child asleep or awake nearby. The cautious road is to put backs against the safest wall he has. The yawl outside the vapor tethered to the ship he still trusts to carry them all. Crew skills and teamwork shape what happens next in a small boat. Launching a yawl safely requires rhythm and muscle memory. Ease down, keep the painter fair, mind the swing, mind the oars. This crew would have that rhythm. Steering a small boat and keeping it trimmed while under tow behind a larger vessel is also learned. A mate can mind the yawl, the captain can move between deck and boat, and a seaman can watch the open hatch in the mother ship. A family on board adds the simplest rule. Keep the child low, warm, and out of the way. All of it is doable in mild to moderate conditions. It only fails when togetherness fails, and togetherness fails when a rope says goodbye. The free surface effect that has already been introduced deserves one more friendly pass, because it is easy to hear and hard to feel until it surprises. Imagine a child standing in a long, shallow tray with a half-inch of water. The tray is on top of a big rolling barrel. When the barrel turns under the tray, the water slides. When the child tries to correct the lean, the water is still on the wrong side for a moment, adding weight to the problem side. The tray feels heavier than it should for half a second. Translate that to a ship. For some angles and some frequencies of roll, that half second can be the difference between feels easy and feels very odd right now. No one wants very odd in the same hour as open hatches and flammable vapor. A short, calm, myth-busting segment keeps the record clean for anyone hearing this story for the first time. The detail about a warm meal sitting untouched on a table is not part of the boarding party's record. It was a fiction hook added later. The talk of bloodstains that could not be explained came from misread stains and dramatic retellings. The boarding record does not show a crime scene. The idea that the final log line hinted at supernatural fear melts when the actual last entry, plain navigational, gets read aloud. Each small correction protects the case from the weight of invented color. The cultural afterlife of the name Mary Celeste, misprinted as Marie Celeste in a popular short story, shows how fast fiction can repaint a plain hull. That story, written decades after the event, sold fear and wonder because fear and wonder sell. It also cemented false details. What the case needs now is a voice that treats it like a museum object, gently, precisely, without adding paint where none existed. The respectful way to keep people interested is not to add phantoms. It is to add clarity. Weather backcasts fill the empty spaces where imaginations would otherwise roam. Charts of pressure systems show passing depressions and wind fields that turned practical days into busy nights. Swell from distant storms can arrive with long, smooth rhythm even when the local wind is easy, lifting and lowering a ship in silence that wears on nerves. In such conditions, a small boat on a painter can already be an unsteady place in which to sit. A hard gust hitting at the wrong angle multiplies the unsteady. Imagine then the temptation to cast off and circle back under oars or sail to reapproach the mother ship safely. That is a sound instinct in a harbor. In open ocean, a sound instinct can become a last glimpse. The math to land a small boat in the Azores is fair to present in round numbers that anyone can feel. At 4 knots in kind wind for 12 hours, a small crew covers fewer than 50 nautical miles. In contrary set and awkward chop, that number sags. Visibility from a small boat's low eye line is poor. Islands hide behind the curve of the earth at surprisingly short range. Miss the land by 5 miles with no lighthouse in sight, and every mile afterward is a coin toss. A crew could have passed within a horizon's width of land and never known it. That is not myth. That is a horizon at sea level. Salvage law's quieter dimension is cultural. Courts do not like being fooled. When a judge cannot prove deceit, but worries about being played, the award number becomes a frown. Sailors read those numbers. The Dea Gratia's crew walked away, paid but not celebrated. That nuance fed rumors, because humans lean into suspicion when symbols are muddy. The law said carefully, "We find no crime." The size of the check added, "But we are not thrilled." The public translated "not thrilled" into 1,000 ghost stories. That is a human habit, older than any ship in this story. Ethics in a mystery without a known end. Ask narrators to hold two truths at once. The puzzle is compelling. The people are not props. Straight names and basic decency are not optional features. When the story can be told without scaring anyone, the decent choice is to avoid scare. When a family's letters say steady, a script should not say reckless. Mystery is not a license. It is a test. Modern recreations, controlled flashes and test boxes, drift experiments with small open boats, slosh tests in model tanks, stack up to confirm plausibility. Researchers have demonstrated that alcohol vapor can be ignited in a way that moves air with a soft bang and leaves no black scars on wood. Engineers have shown that small amounts of water across a broad area in a hold can reduce stability enough to feel wrong on deck. Mariners have towed small boats and watched the paints and ropes wear in silent ways that feel invisible until they are not. Each demonstration is limited and honest. None of them replays the exact hour at sea. Together they make clear that ordinary decisions under unusual conditions is not a cop-out. It is a path. Watch out for this. The old hens say, whenever a famous case earns too many easy answers, it's time to slow down and count again. Primary sources beat summaries. Weather and hardware beat rumor. 3 columns in a ledger beat a paragraph that knows too much. These slow habits look dull. They are the only habits that protect truth. When a story is good enough to tempt anyone to reach for something shiny. A few more scenelets keep this grounded in daily life at sea. On the Dea Gratia, a mate kneels with a hammer and taps a plank by the main hatch. The sound tells him whether wood is swollen or sound. In Mary Celeste's galley, the stove is secured for sea, its iron belly empty and cool, a metal mute on worry. In the captain's cabin, a drawer holds a little sewing kit with needles and sail twine. The twine says normal day more convincingly than a headline ever could. On the quarter deck, a pencil mark in a log shows barometer inches that on any other day would be boring. In the yawl, if that is where they sat, a coil of line sits quietly under a thwart like a promise. The sea does not plan to honor. Now stretch the lens from one ship to the pattern of rational abandonments that have saved lives. Many captains have stepped down early and lived long enough to be teased at barside for caution. Their families did not tease. From those cases, a single rule rises. If a skipper leaves his ship in order, with instruments and a plan, and hopes to rejoin her later, he has not failed. He has kept faith with the sea's oldest contract. Keep people alive first. Save the ship second. This rule does not need legend to shine. It simply needs to be repeated. Contrasts keep the Mary Celeste case properly sharp. Some abandoned ships show lines cut by axes, cabins stripped bare, sails flapping, water roaring through a sprung plank. Others show chaos in the galley, a stove tipped, fittings half loose. This ship showed none of that mess. The decency of the deck is almost haunting, if words like that were allowed here. Better to say the order on board is the case's backbone. Order shrinks the universe of plausible reasons to leave. It does not push a listener toward spooks. It pushes a listener toward modest human fear in the face of multiple small warnings. There is a second lens, a cultural one. The simple phrase "perfectly fine" carries a trap. A ship can be sound in hull and weak in morale. It can be technically seaworthy and emotionally worrying. Perfectly fine in a report often means no smoking hole in the side. It does not mean the captain felt safe in all corners. To put it differently, a deck that looks okay to a stranger who walks aboard at noon will not erase what a crew smelled in the dark at 3 a.m. The record favors the crew's senses over the stranger's snapshot. Return, just briefly, to barometer and swell. A captain reads a falling glass, like a whisper from tomorrow. A steady glass cuts both ways. It can reassure or it can hide a descending swell from a far-off gale that decided to visit without warning. The human body notices swell before eyes do. Ankles and inner ears write notes faster than sky. If a deck felt different enough to worry a man who knew it well, the page that mattered was written there, not on paper. What about the quiet tools almost every captain carried? A lead line could find depth in shallower, coastal waters. Here it would find only no bottom. A sounding rod in the bilge could lie if it caught on a frame or moved through a pocket and stuck there. Repeating that pumps were in use tells a limited truth. Repeating that pumps may have been clogged tells a second limited truth. Together they make a persuasive mood. There was water, they were working on it. They were not sure they had it under control. Mood is not evidence of disaster. It is evidence of care. Years after the event, a mishmash of articles, pamphlets, and fireside talk glued false details onto the hull like barnacles. A single evening's reading can scrape them off. What remains is resilient. A child had a small space of her own aboard. A mother had laid out practical items to make the cabin feel like a room, not a locker. A captain who liked rules had a neat desk. Sailors had their rope and canvas in order. The main hatch was not nailed shut. The yawl was not there, and a different ship saw the whole thing drifting like a question mark. Let's go gentle into the practical endgame. If the wreck or what remains of it had been found later, the playbook would have been simple and sober. Secure the site, photograph and map every significant piece, recover recorders if the era had them, recover representative cargo fragments, study hardware for wear and fracture, weigh all with weather and drift, report. In the century when this happened, recorders were still dreams. That absence is why this case breathes. In a modern version of the story, a box would tell the last hours in numbers and foot-pounds. Here, only textures and small facts speak. A lightning-fast sweep through popular questions keeps the room calm. Why didn't the crew just wait aboard? Because a conservative captain facing possible vapor in a ship that felt off might rule short exit, line attached to be the wiser weight. Could an explosion have thrown them all into the sea? A truly violent explosion leaves marks. None were seen. Why take instruments if they plan to come back? Because good navigators do not allow a small boat to be blind, even for a few hours. Insurance against being cut loose. Why not drop anchor to stay put? In deep mid-ocean there is no anchor line long enough to matter. Wouldn't a tow line from the yawl back to the ship be foolproof? Nothing at sea is foolproof. Chafe is relentless and quiet. Culture filled in the rest, because people do not love an unsolved page. An opera took Dutchman in another century. A short story took Celeste in this one. Films and specials borrowed both and brazed them with handheld shadows. It is fine to nod at those. It is better to hold on to the legal documents, the logs and the shipwright's common sense. The story is good enough on its own. It is a dry whisper, not a scream. The second long arc lands without a crescendo. It trades in patience, an intact hull, a family and crew absent, a cargo that can speak without flame, a bilge that might have lied by inches, a set of decisions that lean toward come back in a minute, a painter that wore or was cut in a moment that nobody would think twice about, if not for what followed, a ship that kept going because a few sails told it to, a small boat that did what small boats do when wind and current are indifferent to hope. The ocean stayed within its usual rules, the people did too. They were not the only mariners to watch a tidy ship become a floating silence. But their story became the clearest mirror for every similar case that followed. In the decades after the Mary Celeste was found and sailed into Gibraltar, captains and mates used her name as shorthand in letters and bar talk, not for ghosts, but for a checklist. Open hatch, faint smell, pumps that might lie, a boat that is there 1 hour and not the next. It turned into a way to remind young sailors that most nautical mysteries are made of small, ordinary parts that happen to line up at the worst possible time. A careful listener can still hear the difference in tone between people who boarded her and people who only read about her. The former used the plain nouns of work, hatch, pump, canvas, compass, lashings. The latter reached for fog and dread. The first group knew that a ship's mood can change in minutes. The second group wanted an ending that clicked shut like a novel. The record chose the first group and stayed with them. Consider one more pass through the decision window with no dramatics and no leaps. The crew noticed a smell stronger than they liked, and did what training and common sense suggest. They opened up, they pumped, they watched. The ship felt heavier in her turn, not because she was sinking, but because the wrong water was in the wrong place for a few minutes at a time. They reduced canvas to keep her from running, and to make her easy to approach from the yawl. Moving people and a few essential instruments into that boat was not an exit, it was a pause. 1,000 ships have paused like that for an hour or two. The line between hulls held until it didn't. After that the sea wrote the script. Steady wind in the upper sails, poor reach in a low, heavy yawl, visibility that drops to almost nothing even in a daytime squall. When the squall lifted, the small boat saw only horizon. When the brigantine rolled, her open hatch breathed air that no longer threatened anyone. She wore her emptiness like a borrowed coat and kept going. When newspapers eventually mapped theories onto the case, each one offered a thrill in a sentence. A sudden explosion, a pirate raid, a murderous crew, a forged salvage plot, a monster storm. But a case that contains bread, charts, a tidy galley, and a ship's pump tied off in a neat turn is not asking for a hurricane of explanation. It is asking for respect. Respect looks like this. Say plainly what the deck showed. Refuse to make haunted shapes in the rigging. Admit where the line of sight ends. Even the words that became attached to the name perfectly fine warrant a final tune-up. Those words came from how the ship struck. Trained eyes after she had been drifting, not from how she felt to her own crew at the hour of decision. Perfectly fine means no holes, no fire, no torn hull, no obvious storm damage. Perfectly fine does not mean felt safe to stand over an open hatch that smelled wrong at night, while a squall line growled across the horizon. Language can flatten time. Seamanship unflattens it, moment by moment. Small choices in small weather that do not need thunder to be serious. The Gibraltar Court's modest award still looks like a shrug. It is a reminder that institutions also struggle to hold uncertainty. Judges prefer lines that meet in one point. The Mary Celeste drew a triangle and asked the court to live with it. The court paid the salvors because the law said it must, but paid them little because mood is a factor no code can erase. That mood leaked into public memory. Here is the steadying truth. A small award is not proof of dark acts. It is proof of human discomfort when answers do not click. If a listener wants one last practical test to hold the case in balance, it is this. Ask which explanation requires the fewest new facts. Pirates require a fast boarding that leaves no loot taken, no fight, no damage, and a full cargo, already too many demands. Fraud requires 2 captains to stage a vanishing and trust a judge to pay handsomely and quietly. Again, too many demands. A mutiny requires invisible quarrels that end in a launch, where everyone agrees to stay tidy and take only selected instruments. Unlikely. A rational temporary abandonment requires only what the deck shows. Smell, vent, pump, reduce canvas, put people in the boat while the situation clears, lose the attachment point when rope and weather say so, and then fall to geometry. It is not glamorous. It is enough. The most respectful way to end is with people, not puzzles. Names on the crew list belong to hands who hauled on sheets, scrubbed decks, mended sails, and kept night watches when the rest of the world slept. A captain's wife set small domestic things in a small space to make a cabin feel like a home on a dry street. A toddler's presence changed the arithmetic of caution in a way that needs no speeches. The crew of the Dia Gratia worked quietly through their duty: launch, board, list, secure, sail, testify. None of these human acts are improved by a shadow in the corner of the story. All of them are lightened by restraint. A short, precise image closes the ledger better than any flourish. A boarding party stands in the hatchway, breathing the same air that worried the absent captain. Sun warms the deck in a friendly way that the last crew may not have enjoyed. The pump handle sits still, tied off with one turn. A chart lies ready for a noon sight that will never be taken. The yawl's empty davits frame the sky, and in that rectangle of blue is the shape of everything that followed. Distance, timing, and the hard truth that two vessels can part cleanly and never find each other again in a world that looks to land eyes small. The same image can be turned to teach. Mariners still talk about line management, like it is a boring job for apprentices. It is not. Chafe is quiet until it is not. A painter that moves through a fair lead at a bad angle can chew itself thin in an afternoon. A crew can put on leathering, change the angle, and gain days. On that day, if chafe was the villain, it chose its hour. If a gust pushed the yawl wrong under the counter, a knife used in kindness might have been the moment of loss. These are not Gothic props. They are the tools and hazards of normal work. In a few maritime museums, a small placard sits near the Mary Celeste's name and lists only measured words: date, position, the salvers, the court, the cargo, the people. The space after those words is the important part. It is left empty on purpose. That emptiness is the shape of honesty. The story makes room for it. So should any telling. There is room, too, for one more gentle correction that helps those who love the case keep it steady. The famous short story that marinated the public imagination in eeriness added a misspelling and several details that never happened. It did not intend harm. It intended a good read. But a good read is not a good record. When this name appears in a conversation, it is fair to ask, do you mean the real ship or the story? If the answer is the real ship, the conversation must keep to the deck and to the sworn words of those who walked it. A final glance at the Dia Gratia's log shows the sobriety of trained eyes, position, weather, sails, the work done, and the judgment calls that followed. That document is not hormonal. It does not surge for effect. It records work. That calmness is what kept a salvage within the lines when rumor wanted to drive it off the chart. It also offers a way to talk about this case with people who meet it for the first time. Start with work, not wonder. Let the wonder come later, and make it the quiet kind. The wonder that people handle danger with competence and composure until luck stops returning their calls. From the first sighting to the last argument in a cafe, the outline stays the same. An intact hull, a cargo that can make air feel wrong, a set of small hydrodynamic and human factors that pushed decent mariners to take a safe step into a boat, and a simple break that made that step final. If someone insists on an ending that would please a theater, the best answer is to take them on deck and show them a rope passed over a rough edge. Ask them to pull gently for a minute, show them the glaze of heat, the lifted fibers, the whitening, the quiet. Wait, let one, then two, then 6 threads go. That sound, no sound at all, will teach the ending better than any speech. In the years after, the name Mary Celeste became a test for writers and speakers. Can the story be told cleanly, without adding thunder? The best versions did it by moving in straight lines, listing facts, adding only the explanations that fishermen and mates would nod at, ending with rest rather than with sparks. The worst versions staged eerie banquets and left steaming bowls for effect. The real vessel deserves to live in the better company. A closing paragraph earns its place by being as plain as the case itself. The ship was found. The crew was not. The deck showed care, not panic. The likely chain is modest and human. Vent, pump, step away for a while with a line on, lose the line, and then live or die beyond the horizon of what a later court and crew could see. The sea did not break any rules to make this happen. People did not either. They read ordinary signs. They chose ordinary remedies. The ordinary failed them in the single place where it could. That is not a spooky ending. It is a sad one. It is also truthful enough to stand without decoration. Recap in one clear breath. An intact brigantine, with a sensitive cargo, drifted into view after days without a crew to tend her. The evidence on board supports a temporary rational evacuation to a yawl, while venting fumes and sorting pump trouble. The link between hull and boat likely failed by chafe or necessity. Drift and low sightlines swallowed any chance reunion. Courts rewarded salvage modestly and suspicion lightly. Fiction and rumor added noise. The facts that remain point to seamanship, not to spectacle. What is owed to this case is simple. Keep its edges clean. Use it to teach venting, pumping, line care, drift, and the honest weight of caution. Speak the names of those who vanished without turning them into characters with invented lines. Let the ship remain what she was when the boarding party first saw her. A working vessel in need of hands, not a stage set. The sea keeps some secrets because the geometry of distance and time is merciless. It keeps others because human decency refuses to turn loss into theater. This is one of those. If a listener leaves with a final image, let it be this one. A blue Atlantic, wind catspaws powdering the surface. A brigantine's sails filled just enough to keep her steady, and far astern, too small to see now. A yawl with people who did everything right until luck ended. No thunder rolls, no lantern flickers ominously. There is only open water and the knowledge that good seamanship is not a charm. It is a craft practiced under rules that sometimes do not care for the outcome. That knowledge is sober, not frightening. It is exactly the knowledge that keeps other crews alive. And so the telling ends where the court and the log did, with a ship found perfectly fine by the measures that matter to a passerby, and with the clean admission that what happened between decks and yawl was both reasonable and irreversible. The last word belongs to the quiet contract sailors, sign with the ocean on every departure, do the ordinary things well, and accept that sometimes the ordinary will not carry you all the way home.